something to follow along in the message, on the back of the bulletin, we have a note-taking guide with some scriptures printed on it that may be helpful to you. We also have them, or will have them on the screen for you as we go through this. One afternoon, Jesus was sitting with his disciples on Mount Olives, which that mountain is directly across from the city of Jerusalem. You can stand there today and look at the great wall where the Dome of the Rock is sitting today. But in the day when Jesus was there with his disciples and they were looking across that valley, they saw the temple, which was the very center of Jewish life. It stood for their national identity, their sense of who they were as a people of God. It was everything to them. And the disciples were questioning Jesus about the future. They wanted to know what's going to happen to our city, to our people, to the kingdom, because in their minds they had visions of him setting up his throne right there in the city of David, and they were hoping to have good positions in that new government. But instead of Jesus speaking of the glory of Israel and all that was going to happen to the nation, he predicted the very opposite to them. He said that the whole place was going to be torn down, that a foreign power was going to destroy the nation. And he said, if you look at the temple and all of the buildings, not one brick is going to be left upon top of another. They're all going to be disassembled and your people will be scattered. And it was like a sucker punch to the gut. They did not expect that kind of a statement. It would be like if you and I in the year 99 or 2000 were standing in New Jersey at the Hudson River looking across to the Manhattan skyline, and somebody was predicting to us what was going to happen, and instead of glory and expansion and growth, they said that terrorists are going to come in and hit the Twin Towers and knock them down, and that the city will be in smoke and flames, that this symbol of our prosperity, this symbol of our national identity of a capitalistic nation of commerce, that's just going to crumble. We would have stood in shock hearing that kind of a prediction. And in fact, when the Twin Towers were knocked down, people asked the question, where was God? How did God allow this? Why didn't God stop this thing from happening? And so that's what was happening to the disciples as Jesus was making this prediction, only on a much grander scale, because the temple, the Twin Towers were just part of our identity. The temple was everything to them, and Jesus was telling them that it was going to be torn down. Well, after a number of days, Jesus encountered the greatest event on earth when he was crucified, and then 3 days later he was resurrected from the dead. And now they're 50 days after that, and they are again on the mountain. And they're thinking now about the future. He's gone through his death, and all of that has happened. And they asked him, is this now the time that you're restoring your kingdom? Is this it? We know that you went through death, and now you've conquered death. This has got to be the moment. And he told them no. In fact, he said, it's not for you to know the times or the seasons or the epochs that the Father has set by his own calendar. That's not for you to know. I have a different plan for you. We're not going to set up Israel as a great nation. We're not going to become some political power. We're not going to relive the glory that we once had in years gone by. And I'm sure the disciples must have been thinking, then what's the point? I mean, you went through death and resurrection and had this amazing victory, and you're still not going to restore stuff? What's the point of all of this? And yet Jesus wanted them to understand that what he was doing, his mission, was far greater than some political identity. It was far greater than nationalism and the sovereignty of the people of Israel. The eternal destiny of every man, every woman, and every child in the entire human race of the entire planet was at stake. And so his mission, his purpose, was far bigger than something like national Israel. And so he gave them what we would call the commission. He gave them his marching orders just before ascending into heaven. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 18, it says that Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. That's an amazing statement. This is the God of the universe who controls everything. He controls the wind. He controls the waves. He literally controls the movements of the planets. At one time, he stopped the sun so that the Israelites could engage in battle. He's parted the Red Sea. This is the God of gods, the King of the universe, and he's saying all authority over all of the universe, authority over everything on earth, over every kingdom, over every system, everything. It's in my hands. It's been given to me. And on the basis of that authority, now I'm going to commission you. I'm going to delegate authority to you. And you would think, wow, that's got to be authority to conquer the world. But he says something different to them. He says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. He tells them, the thing that I want you to do is to go. Not stay here in Jerusalem. This isn't about Israel. In fact, I want you to leave your beloved city, your beloved land, and I want you to go as far as the four corners of the earth, because I want you to make disciples of every single nation, every ethnicity, every people group on the planet. I want you to make disciples, and here's what I want you to do. He says, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. That's going to be that marker that lets you know that they've decided with their life to become a follower of Jesus. When they're baptized, they're declaring that allegiance to me, Jesus is saying, that they will follow me. But beyond that, I want you to do more than that. He says in verse 20, teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. So they're going to become my followers. They need to live the way that I've taught you. I want you to teach that to them. And then he says, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Well, we're still not at the end of the age yet. It hasn't all ended. And so the commission, these marching orders, still stand because Jesus has still not returned. And so his commission to his disciples is his commission to you and I. This verse states our mission, given to us not by some denomination, not by church officials, given to us by Jesus himself. And that mission, to boil it down and make it simple, it is to make disciples who make disciples. That's our mission. That's why Jesus left you and I here on this planet, to make disciples who make disciples. If somebody asks you, what is the mission of Trinity Wesleyan Church? The answer is to make disciples who make disciples. It's only 6 words, so it's easy to remember. To make disciples who make disciples. Say that with me, will you? To make disciples who make disciples. So if somebody says, what is your mission? What's your answer going to be? To turn to somebody and say, our mission is to make disciples who make disciples. That's not some mission that was concocted in a church boardroom. Some ecclesiastical authorities weren't getting together to think of some marketing strategy. This comes right from the mouth of Jesus. This is what I want you to do. So this isn't coming from me. It's not coming from the board. This is coming from the one who said, all authority on heaven and earth has been given unto me. And here's what I want you to do with that authority. His mission is for the church. But what is the church? I mean, that word is thrown around a lot, and we use it in a lot of different ways. We think of the church as being sometimes a building. We come to the church. You know, hey, that little church up on the corner, and we're talking about the building. Or we think of the institution, that organization, the Episcopal Church, the Wesleyan Church, the Methodist Church. It's an institution or an organization. Or we think of it as a worship gathering. We're going to come and do church together, we sometimes talk about. And we've used that word to describe those things, and they're all wrong, because that's not what the church is. The church is the mystical body of Christ. It is the believers who are filled with the Spirit of God throughout the entire world. The people are the church, because the word church is the word in Greek. It's ekklesia, and it means called out ones. Those who have been called out to be representatives, to be followers of Jesus. That's what the church is. But if we think of the church as an institution, if we think of it as a building or as a worship service, then the job of making disciples becomes the responsibility of the organization. Go and make disciples. That's what the church has to do. Oh, but that's an institution, so that's their job. It's not really something for me. I mean, if the pastor and his staff, they're supposed to make the disciples because they're the representatives of the organization. And so we avoid our responsibilities. I mean, if I support the organization, I attend on Sunday, I give money to the offering, then I'm doing my part in this commission to make disciples. But that's not how Jesus intended his people to function. In Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12, the Apostle Paul was giving instruction, laying out the details of it to the church. And this is what he said to the people. Now, these are the gifts Christ gave to the church. the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers. So he called people to fill those roles. And then he goes on and he says in verse 12, their responsibility is, and it doesn't say their responsibility is to make disciples, and you guys just kind of supply their salary. That's not what he says. He says their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, which is the body of Christ. So he's saying the way God designed this is he called certain people to certain roles, pastor, teacher, evangelist. They're going to equip the people. But the people are the ones who are going to build up the church. And building up the body of Christ means making disciples. They're the ones who are going to make disciples. So the pastors and teachers will train them, but they're going to be the ones who are going to do it. And when Jesus gave the commission, he was speaking to each individual disciple. It wasn't some nameless collective, but he was talking to all of them individually. He expected a chain reaction that would work its way from the time of the original disciples all the way down to you. Because Peter made a disciple, probably Polycarp, who made a disciple, who made a disciple, who made a disciple, there was this chain, either through Peter or through John or through Andrew or through Bartholomew or through Philip, any of those original 11, because one of them fell away, Judas. But they made a disciple who made a disciple who made a disciple who made a disciple, and it came all the way down almost 2,000 years later to you. And you were introduced to Christ because somebody was faithful to take up that baton and pass it along into your life. Disciples making disciples. Now, the word disciple means follower. We don't really use the word disciple that much anymore. Sometimes when you think of a disciple, you think of some kind of a guru or a cultic leader. But that word actually just means a follower. And you get that when Jesus called his first disciples. In Matthew 4:18 and 19, it says, one day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, come, follow me. That's what a disciple is. Somebody who just follows Jesus. They are his follower. And what's interesting is that he inseparably tied the call to come and follow him to the call to make disciples. The call to follow him was tied to the call of reaching other people. Because as you read the verse, in verse 19, it says that Jesus called out to them, come, follow me. And then he finishes the sentence this way, and I will show you how to fish for men. It's inseparably linked. If you're going to be a follower of mine, you got to be a fisherman. If you're going to follow me, you've got to call others to follow me. If you're going to be my disciple, you've got to make other disciples, because connected inseparably to the call to follow him is the call to make disciples. In other words, you can't be a faithful follower of Jesus if you don't make disciples. It's not an option. It's not something, some of the churches thought it is. We'll just leave it up to the institution, the professionals to do it. And we've completely missed the call of God, because every single person who claims the name of Jesus Christ who's sitting in this room, it is not an option. If you are a follower of Jesus, he expects you to make disciples. And whatever way you can do that, and whatever way you contribute to that purpose, that is his expectation of every single one of us. There's a pastor who I think maybe helps to explain that better than I can. And so I've got a little video clip of him. I want you to listen to what he says as he explains this better than me. Listen, watch this video clip.
The call to discipleship and the call to disciple making are most definitely not just for mature Christians. You look at the very beginning of the book of Matthew, and Jesus approaches four men, first four disciples, and he says, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. His call to them was an initial call to discipleship. And that initial call to discipleship was an inevitable call to die to themselves. He would say to them over and over and over again, if you're going to come after me, you must deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me. You must renounce everything you have and everything you hold on to cling to me. This is what it means. This is the essence of what it means to follow Christ. And so abandonment for the glory of Christ is the essence of what it means to be a Christian, not for those who are ready for that kind of mature teaching. Similarly, though, even when we see follow me and we hear Jesus say, follow me and I will make you fishers of men, what we hear is that fishing for men, making disciples, from the very beginning was tied to being a disciple. And so these 4 men, from the very beginning of their initial call to follow Christ, were being called to fish for men, were being called to give their lives leading other men to become followers of Christ. And so disciple making is not an optional command for the mature Christian. The essence of what it means to follow Jesus, to be a disciple of Jesus, is to abandon your life to follow him, to his person and his mission, which is to make disciples of all nations. So every disciple is a disciple maker. Every follower of Christ is a fisher of men. This is not just for mature Christians. This is for every follower of Jesus.
I think it's ironic that that message is on a site called Radical, because that sounds radical, but that's actually just normal. That's what Jesus intended for us to do. And, you know, and there's a lot of excuses. Some people feel like they're not ready to do this. They think, you know, I haven't been a Christian long enough, or, you know, I don't have my act together, so how can I do that? Or no one's going to listen to me, or, you know, I'm not going to know how to answer the tough questions if I start leading somebody in this journey. But you don't have to have arrived. You don't have to be, like he said, mature. You just have to be one step perhaps beyond, so that you're both joining arms and you're walking together. In fact, Jesus was the first disciple maker, and so he's the standard. And so when he called his disciples to make disciples, they could have said that they'll be ready to make disciples when they're just like Jesus, which means they would never make disciples, because nobody can be just like Jesus, because he's the ultimate standard. And so he wasn't expecting them to reach some level of perfection. They just had to have willing hearts, to be willing to pour in to other people. That's why he promised the Holy Spirit. He said to them in the upper room, wait for the promise of the Father, for the Spirit will come upon you, and he will give you power, and then you'll be my witnesses. And so it's the whole Moses thing. When God called Moses, and it was really the second person, the Christ in the burning bush, who spoke to him and called him to say to Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses said, I can't do that. I stammer. I can't speak well. No one's going to listen to me. You know, I'm a reject because I had to flee the country. And God answered every one of his excuses. Well, look, I'll be your mouthpiece for you. I'll put favor upon you. I'll work miracles through you. I'll even send your brother Aaron, and he'll do the speaking for you. You just be my witness. And he was offering excuse after excuse, and God got angry with him, because he said, it's not about you. It's not how good you are, how talented you are, Moses. It's not what you've got going on. It's none of that. It is about the fact that you are a vessel, and I am going to flow through you. So the one who's going to empower you to do this is God. It's not you. So we don't measure this by, do I add up? Do I measure up? Am I mature enough? The issue is, am I willing to let Jesus work through me? That's really the issue. Jesus' first disciples were fishermen. So when he gave the call, he put it in that language. That's why he said, I will make you fishers of men. But in order to fish for people, or to fish, you've got to go where the fish are. You've got to find the place where the fish are biting. We had our men's retreat just this last weekend, Friday and Saturday. We had a fun time as we gathered together. Most of us old guys played euchre. That's what we did. We didn't want to do anything too strenuous. And I was excited about playing euchre because I won the tournament, which is kind of crazy because I actually had to leave early, and so it's the only tournament I've ever won, and I wasn't even there to get my prize. So I think you owe me like a steak dinner or something, right? Somebody else took over for me. They finished, and they won it for me. So, so maybe it's Mike that gets the prize. But while us old guys were playing euchre, Wes took his little son Lucas down to the local pond that's there at the facility at Chenoweth Trails, and a lot of people must not fish that because it's just loaded with fish. And I think Lucas caught like 14 bluegill, and he was so excited coming back with his bluegill, showing us and talking to us about what he caught. And he caught an 18-inch bass, so he caught a really nice bass as well. Not Lucas, but Wes caught that. But they were there where the fish were biting. And that's what we have to do. We have to go where the fish are if we're going to catch them. So in order to fish for people, we have to go where the people are. But that's the problem that we often see in the church. There are a lot of reasons why we do not go fishing, why we do not make disciples. But I think the biggest one is that most Christians are caught in what I would call a Christian bubble. We're insulated and we're isolated from the world. Josh DeFern of Politico magazine wrote an article this last April reflecting back on the presidential elections this last fall. And he was trying to analyze how the press could be so wrong in their predictions, because they were reporting it in such a way that they were absolutely convinced that Hillary Clinton was going to win the elections. It was just a done deal, and they were shocked beyond imagination when Donald Trump actually won the presidential elections. And so Josh decided to analyze that and try to figure out, how did they miss it so much? How did they miscalculate that? They're still in disbelief. They think something's wrong. They're blaming the Russians caused it to happen, or there's something else, or just you and I are stupid middle country people. You know, we're the undeplorables that don't know what we're doing, and they somehow got to fix those who voted that way, because it's mostly the middle of the country that carried the elections. But he decided to do research to figure out how they were so off in their predictions about that, and he discovered two things. One was that over 90% of journalists self-identify as Democrats. That's one thing. And then with the rise of the internet and the downfall of print journalism and local newspapers, modern journalism has clustered on the coasts. So that today, if you're a journalist, you can live either in New York or you can live in Los Angeles, you can live on the coast, and you don't have to be peppered throughout the nation. So as a result of that, most of the journalists are living in counties and in areas that are heavily Democratic. So everybody around them was going to vote Democratic, so they just assumed the whole country was going to vote Democratic. And so they saw an easy win for Clinton because they lived in those counties that planned to vote that way. They were blinded by groupthink. Everybody in their group was thinking the same way. But the problem was that they were living in a bubble, and so they could not see what the rest of the country was actually thinking, and they were shocked when the elections turned out differently than they thought they would. Well, in the same way they were in a bubble, I think Christians are often in a bubble. The church is in this Christian bubble. And it's understandable. I mean, we're comfortable being around other Christians. We speak the same language. We like the same things. We believe the same things. We naturally drift toward those who are like us. And, you know, for many people in the church, our families are Christians. Our friends are Christians. We hardly ever talk to non-Christians. And when we do, it's only surface interactions. And so we have such a strong Christian culture that we actually have our own Christian music. We have our own Christian radio stations. You saw one of the music songs we sang today. It said K-Love on it. We have the K-Love that's all over the country. We have our own bookstores. We have our own clothing lines. We have our own jewelry. We have our own ties, Christian ties. We even have our own socks. You can buy Christian socks. We have our own comedians. We have our own jargon. We have our own movies. And we expect other Christians to live in that bubble as well. It's what I would call ridiculous bubble expectations. Here's a video I want you to watch that just shows you how ridiculous the expectations are when we expect people to live in the Christian bubble. Just
pretty simple, really. I'm the local rep for ChristianMingle.com. Recently, we've got some reports of people not acting very Christian on dates. So, new company policy now, whenever anyone registers for the site, they send me over to the house, and I just do a quick look around, ask them a few questions just to make sure they're Christian. Hey, Brittany, I'm with Christian Mingle. We just got your application.
No, what do you mean? I didn't sign up for
Oh,
Christian
yeah, one of your
Mingle.
friends signed you up as a joke. Okay, everybody says that. And when did you get saved?
I think 12 maybe. Youth Camp First Baptist Church.
Okay, and do you still go there?
Yes, but it's not called First Baptist
So
anymore.
that's something more like trendy now. It's like Mosaic or Crosspoint or like Watermark.
Thrive Church, actually.
Yeah, you walk into the building, you're not sure if it's a church or a Banana Republic. Hey, Chad, I'm with Christian Mingle. We just got your application. I just need to come over quick, ask you a few questions. Just take a look around the house. Just make sure
I didn't
everything's
agree.
good. Okay.
Is this even legal?
Pretty fast Wi-Fi you got here. You got a filter on this thing? I'm going to give you a mainstream band. You give me the Christian equivalent. Justin Timberlake,
Toby Mac.
Katy Perry,
Francesca Battistelli.
Nickelback.
Skillet.
Okay, and Switchfoot.
Switchfoot.
If I could just get a couple of dates of attendance for you here, just for background. Choir the Fire.
98.
True Love Waits.
2000. Promise Keepers,
04,
Passion Conference,
2010.
and Catalyst.
Pre-registered last week.
Anything information we need to know in here? Oh, what do we have here? That's gonna be a problem. While I was having a look around, I did find your phone.
You took my phone?
Yeah, just a couple things quick I want to go over with you. Looking at here, Tinder and Snapchat are on page 1, and your Bible app is on page 2 in a folder, and it needs to be updated. Look, Google Plus? I mean, Christian or not, who's using Google Plus? In 2011, I noticed that you favorited a tweet with a swear word in it.
Okay.
Mission trips?
Uganda 2009, Dominican Republic 2011, and World Race 2013.
Okay, so 2?
No, that's 3.
Okay, the World Race. I'm talking about real mission trips. We don't count church-sponsored sightseeing tours. Oh, what do we got here? That's gonna be a problem. We've heard it all recently. We've got reports of people going to R-rated movies. Hold on, Left Behind, is this the Kirk Cameron version? I don't think so. Okay. We've heard of people not praying before meals. Let's say you're a nice young Christian woman and we're on the Christian mingle date. Things are going well and we're back at your place eating popcorn and watching Fireproof. Is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, love the book collection. These candles are a little too Catholic-y for me. What about this?
Sure.
No! And Michael's or Hobby Lobby?
Hobby Lobby.
Ulta or Sephora?
Sephora.
Wrong, trick question. Christians shouldn't be that concerned with outward appearances.
Are you serious?
Walgreens is fine, Target, maybe. Spirit lead me, where my trust is without
Borders.
Love's like a hurricane, I am a
Tree.
I can't feel my face when I'm with you.
But I love
Well, you shouldn't love it, and you shouldn't know that song. Is that safe for the whole family? I don't think so. I'm gonna be real honest with you, Brittany. I'm not seeing the fruit.
I don't know what else I can tell you. I volunteer at a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving. I work in the church nursery every week. I got a Bible verse tattooed on my shoulder. In Hebrew.
Okay, Republican or Democrat?
Republican.
Global warming.
No evidence.
Stem cell research.
Don't know what it is, but I'm against it.
Guns.
Love them.
Obama.
Hate them.
Welcome to Christian Mingle. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and on paper, things look great, but I'm going to be real honest with you. Yoga pants? Personally, I just don't see how someone could be a Christian and wear yoga pants. If there's anything I can do to prevent someone from a life of destruction, I feel like my work here is done. And I'm out of here, and don't even bother reapplying until you get rid of those yoga pants, get some Don Miller books added to that collection, you get a letter from a compassion child up on that fridge, okay?
Ridiculous bubble expectations, right? We just live in this. And I get it in one sense. We kind of want to be in the bubble because we don't want the world to come in and contaminate us. But if the world can't get in, then that means that we can't get out either. And Jesus said to us that I want you to be in the world, not of it, but I absolutely want you to be in it. And if we stay in our bubble and don't go outside the Christian bubble to interact with the world around us, how will they ever learn about Jesus? This passage, it sounds like it was written yesterday from the Apostle Paul in Romans 10. Listen to what he says. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of messengers who bring the good news. If we're going to fulfill our God-given mission, which is to make disciples who make disciples, then we have to pop our bubbles. We got to get outside them. And so how do we do that? I want to share with you quickly 4 things that we need to do if we're going to pop that bubble so that we can interact with the world around us. The first one is this, that we're going to have to make the conscious choice to step out of the bubble. It's a conscious decision because here's an important truth. Nobody drifts automatically toward evangelism. That just doesn't happen. We drift toward the bubble rather than reaching out. That's the natural flow because, the bubble's what's comfortable for us. It's what we're used to. It's what's known, and we fear the unknown, and we tend to avoid it by nature. And so that means that stepping outside of the Christian bubble is stepping outside of our comfort zone. And it's not going to happen just because we know that it should or just because we want it to, but we have to make a deliberate decision. We have to say, this is God's purpose for me on earth. The reason God has me here, if for nothing else, the reason is to be outside connecting with lost people. That's why God has sent me here. Even when it was unpopular, Jesus made a decision to spend time outside the religious bubble of his culture and spend time with people in the world. And he garnered great criticism because of it. But he said, look, I didn't come to call the healthy. I came to call the sick. So he spent time in the bars. He spent time in places of disrepute. He spent time with tax collectors. He spent time with those that religious society wouldn't want anything to do with, because those are the people who needed to have the message from him. It's an important commitment for us to say, I'm going to make a commitment. I'm going to start building relationships with people who need God. I want to start making friends. I mean, if I were to ask you, could you count, do you know how many unchurched, unchristian friends you have? There's a lot of Christians who would say, I don't have any. I can't tell you any friends that I have, that I'm close with, that we interact with, that are not Christian. And so there has to be this decision that says, I'm going to start building relationships with people who do not know God. And it is simple as walking across the room. Bill Hybels, pastor of Willow Creek Church, was telling a story one day about he was at a dinner party with a lot of businessmen, and he was kind of standing there, and it was cocktail hour, and he wasn't really into that, and he saw some guy who was standing over by himself, and he decided he'd go over and just say hi to the man. The man didn't have a cocktail in his hand. He just kind of looked like he was standing in a corner, and so he was clearly somebody of a different culture. He was a black man, and you could tell by his dress that he wasn't like the rest of the group that was in the room. So he went over and he introduced himself and asked him who he was, and the guy answered, and they just got into a simple conversation. And he found out in the course of their conversation that the man was Muslim. And that's why he wasn't drinking, because they don't drink, and he just kind of felt out of place. But it was a business meeting, and his company requires him to be there. And so Bill began to ask him questions and said, I'm curious about Islam. What is it that you believe? And he made arrangements with the guy through the conversation to sit down and have lunch the next day with him, just to find out what Islam was about. And he didn't have a desire he wasn't trying to convert the guy, and he wasn't interested in becoming a Muslim, but he wanted to understand the man. He said, my only agenda was just to get to know the guy and just to find out why he believed what he did. And so he said, I spent the lunch hour with him just asking him questions about his faith. And he told me about Islam, and I didn't come back and argue with him. I didn't try to debate him. I just listened. And after that meeting, we decided to have lunch again. And he said for about 10 weeks or so, I spent with him. And he was just telling me about his faith and his beliefs and where he's coming from. And I never once tried to convert him. But after about 10 weeks, when we kind of exhausted everything he believed, he finally turned to me and he said, so why don't you tell me about what you believe? And so he started to share with him what he believed about Jesus. And then it went the other way. And in time, this man fell under the moving of the Holy Spirit of God, and he gave his life to Jesus Christ. But it just started out with saying, you know what, I want to make a friend. I'm going to make an intentional decision to walk across the room and say hi to somebody that I don't know. Here's the second thing that we have to do. We will have to look at where we spend our time. How do we spend our time? Every ministry, listen to this, and you wouldn't normally hear a preacher say this, but every ministry or church commitment you say yes to is great, but it's also saying no to free time that you would have to spend with people who need the gospel. And so let me say this. We definitely want you to commit some of your time to Christian ministries, but make sure that you have space in your life for hanging out with non-Christians to build relationships. Now, some of you, your lives are incredibly busy. I've been thinking about this myself and saying, how are we going to connect? Because if you think you live in a bubble, pastors really live in bubbles. And I thought, how am I going to do this? My life is so busy. How can I find time for this? Well, I'm discipling some guys on Wednesday nights, and so I tried to pray about this and get creative and say, we've got to find a way to interact with those who are not part of the church community, because the guys that I'm discipling them, I'm training them and teaching them and pouring into them that they need to be discipling somebody. So we've got to find a way to rub shoulders and build friendships. Well, we discovered that recently we've announced it to you before, that the Health and Recovery Center has opened up in town, which is a place for those who are trying to get away from drugs and get away from alcohol addiction, to just have a place to hang out. And so we did a little inquiry and found out that that's open through the week, and they have people that are manning that. So if folks off the street come in, they'll have somebody there that can let them in and just talk with them and maybe minister to them. And so I did a little inquiry and asked, could our discipleship group, instead of meeting in my office, could we meet at the Health and Recovery Center? They said that we could, and so we went there, and And the first week we were there, as we arrived, there was a whole bunch of guys standing outside the door just talking. And we discovered that the hour before we're there, they have an AA meeting. And so we mingled with them a little bit. We invited one of the guys to stay with us, and he did. So his name's Aaron. So Aaron's joined us, and he's in our group. But the second week we went, there was nobody there except Aaron. And we asked him what was going on, and he said, well, they were all really, really hungry. So as soon as the AA meeting was over, they were gone. And so we devised a plan. We're not going this week because of our town hall meeting, but next week when we go, we're going to dispatch somebody to arrive early because we're doing Bible study here at 6. So when that's done, we're going to dispatch someone early. They're going to buy a couple of pizzas. We're going to take a couple of pizzas, so when those guys are coming out of that meeting, we can say, hey, come join us. We'll feed you. And that'll bring those guys into our meeting, and it's just a way of saying, all right, my schedule's already maxed, but we're going to find a creative way to use what we're doing to connect with people who are not church so that we can build relationships with those in the community. And there are 1,000 ways that it can be done, but it's something that we have to choose to do. Here's number 3. We will have to find connections based on something other than Jesus. Let me say that again because it almost sounds wrong. We need to find connections based on something other than Jesus. Hear me out with what I mean by that. If the only things that we ever engage in are Christian, like Christian concerts, Christian worship experiences, Christian conferences, then we're never going to meet people outside of our bubble to make friends with. And so this is one of those times when it's important for us to pursue our interests and our hobbies that will give us access to unchurched people. You know, it may be as simple as joining a sports team. You know, and instead of being on a church softball league, why not go join a city softball league? You know, if Jesus had to choose, do I want to play softball on the church team with the church league, or do I want to play softball on the city team with the city league? I think Jesus would choose the city league. You know, they're going to be drinking, cussing, and probably smoking and doing all kinds of stuff like that. They're not going to really be interested in Christ. They may not want to hear a thing that he has to say, but I can guarantee you that's the group he'd want to be with, because those are the people who need love, who need the compassion of Jesus Christ. Maybe it's sitting in a different place in a classroom if you're in school. Perhaps it's going to local events, making sure you get to the parades and to the fair and to things like that so that you're mixing with people in the community. Maybe it's joining a club. If you're into cars, join a car club. If you're into a charity, join some kind of a charity. Join a book club. I was on the telephone the other day with a lady who doesn't live in our state. She's a friend of ours from away, and she's well educated, and she's had all kinds of training and certificates, and we were talking about discipleship, and she said to me, she said, you know, I've had all the training I need to have. I don't need to go back to school. Now I just got to find a way to do it. But she said, one of the things I'm struggling with is finding people that I can connect with who, you know, don't know the Lord, because her whole world is a Christian world. Well, in our conversation earlier, she had said to me, her and her husband, they're in their retirement years, and he was a surgeon, so they're able to do this because of his career, but they've got this bucket list, and they go all over the world. They just got back from Croatia. They're going to Venice or to New Zealand. They've been to just they just travel all over the world all the time. They went to Antarctica for a while, just crazy kinds of trips, because he's got this wanderlust and this crazy bucket list. And she takes pictures because she's an amateur photographer, and she's a pretty good one. And so I said to her, you know, you had mentioned that you're an amateur photographer. Where you're living in the city you're in, there's all kinds of photography clubs. Why don't you join a photography club? Just do that. You know, just go to join it, and you'll get to meet people there. And through that, you can develop some friendships. And she said, I never thought of that. That's what I'll do. I'll join a photography club, and that way I can connect with some of those people. So that's what she's going to do. So it's finding what you like. And here's the thing. Don't choose something that you're not going to enjoy. You know, if you like shooting guns, do something with guns. You like hunting, do something with hunting. You like fishing, do something with fishing. But find something that you like to do, but find something where there are lots of people involved so that you can connect and build friendships with people who are outside the church, so that your only friends are not people that are inside these four walls, you know. And you might think, well, now, how can I fit that in? I mean, I don't have any extra time in my life, and I don't want to, you know, cross some of my existing friendships with other Christians out of my life, because I do stuff with them, and I don't want to sacrifice that. I don't have time to add this. Well, what about asking them to join you in the thing that you're doing, so that the two of you can do it together? You can meet some of these people together. You can pray for them together. Here's number 4. If we're going to do this, we will have to build real relationships. And here's what I mean by that. Don't just spend time with people in order to preach to them. Don't get out there and say, well, I want to join this club, and my only goal is to evangelize them, and that's all that you're doing is just because that's like trying to say, I'm going to put another notch in my evangelism belt. Your new friends will not feel valued or loved if they find out that you just became friends with them in order to turn them to Christ. So it's really about developing friendships with them because they truly are your friend. When you get a chance to share Jesus in these situations too, and I'm going to do some training on this later this summer when we approve our, if and when we approve our prescription that we were given last week, we're going to do some training on this. But when you have an opportunity to share with someone about Christ, because through that friendship, the opportunity will arise. You don't preach at them, you don't force things down their throat, but as you get to know one another, the opportunity is going to arise. And the way that we share with them, we don't preach them, but we're testimonial. We share with them what our life was like before we knew Jesus, how we met Jesus, and how did Jesus change my life. Those three things, very simple. What was my life like before I knew him? How did I meet him? And how did he change my life? And so we share those kinds of things. There are so many creative ways to make friends. In fact, I want to share with you, this just shows how easy it is and how starving people are for friendship. Watch this video.
I have never, ever been in a ball pit before.
What?
You've never been in the ball pit?
Nah, never.
You gotta go.
No, I've seen them, but I've never been in one.
You know, I remember these ball pits, like kids threw up in them.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so let's see.
Okay, this is a good one. Share 3 things on your bucket list.
First one is to go skydiving.
I want to go skydiving.
Have you ever had those dreams where you're just like floating and, you know, you're flying and everything? Scuba diving is just exactly that.
Don't you get afraid of drowning or being underwater, or getting attacked by an octopus, or any of those things?
I want to learn curling,
What is it?
like that Winter Olympic sport.
Oh, all right, where you slide the
Yeah, and then it's like bowling and sweeping.
Find one thing you have in common. Do you play sports?
Not currently.
I play soccer, so.
Soccer?
Yeah. All right.
Actually, I play the drums. Do you play any instruments?
I quit everything I ever tried.
All right.
Actually, fun fact, these aren't real teeth. Yeah.
I have a flipper tooth.
Really?
Ah! Oh my God! No! I can't. Wait.
Mm-hmm. What?
My front tooth.
Oh my gosh.
What? You don't even understand. I swear to God, I feel like someone planted us here for this reason.
Destiny.
Describe the first time you fell in love.
Oh, I think it was kindergarten. I don't remember his name, but he was beautiful.
I was in the Navy,
You were in the Navy?
and my husband was in the Navy. Long story short, before he ever kissed me or we were ever really together, he told me he loved me. 24 years later, we're more in love and we're better friends than even from the very beginning.
That's true love in its finest.
Talk about someone who inspires you.
It's all right to talk about somebody that's a religious character.
Yeah, why not? This is our ball pit. We can talk about whoever we want, right?
Jesus.
All right.
Just my peers. They're all creative in their own ways and have their own realities and own lessons. I just grow from everybody else's as well as my own.
Martin Luther King, I think, because the fact that we're sitting in this box together is a big deal, you know?
You know who inspires me, believe it or not, is my daughter. She is everything I ever wanted to be.
All right. Talk about the experience that changed your life. Oh, that's a good one. After my wife decided that it was time that we split, I started to have a different perspective on life. I saw women differently. I saw relationships differently. I think I became more appreciative of women.
How old did you say you are? 20?
Yeah.
Okay. At the age of 21, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And it pulled the rug out from all my plans. it really changes the way you look at things.
My grandmother has it.
Who does?
My grandmother.
There's our comment.
We found the comment.
We found the comment.
That's why it was still here. We found the comment.
Oh, create a secret handshake. Okay.
Okay, but nothing was spit.
Okay, so that.
I need both hands. Okay. So this.
And then whoever gets on the top makes a flag.
Oh, now I forgot what it is.
And then like maybe a little twitch in the middle.
1, 2, 1.
1, 2.
High 10.
All right, we did it.
Awesome. I actually had a lot of fun. I was a little bit nervous because normally you don't hang out with strangers in ball pits. I got to learn some pretty cool things about you.
It was really nice to meet you.
You too.
I hope I see you
take a
again.
look.
Okay, I love it.
I'm really impressed by you. I was worried that I would start talking to you like a mom. I don't know if I did.
No. Nah, you
No.
didn't. Trust me. You did good.
You know, that says people are starving for friendships. They're starving for it. We just have to take a little bit of a risk to reach out there and offer to be a friend. But when we do that, there's an amazing opportunity to introduce them to the one who wants to be the greatest friend than anyone has ever known. Jesus doesn't condemn, he doesn't judge, he loves, he rescues, he restores, and he wants to do that, and he wants to use you to do that with others. We're going to close with a song that is a prayer. It's a hymn that's a commitment. And when we sing this today, in fact, I shared the song with Pastor Woody on Wednesday, and he said, I don't think anybody in the church is even going to know it, because it's something that we sang like 1,000,000 years ago in camp meetings. But it's a commitment to God. So I don't want you just to sing it. I want you to really, if you're going to sing this, make this your statement before the church to God. Here's what it says. I'll read you the first verse and then we'll turn to it. It says, it may not